part 9 of the Hydrogen to Human series. The series of videos in which we describe how nothing more than clouds of hydrogen can self-assemble into human beings. We looked at the problem of trying to describe reality just using physics, and clearly it can't be done. We see a reality which is full of mathematical structure as well as physical structure. And before there's any physical structure, it's all mathematical. But I need some energy to describe what's going on. So I need a combination of physics, the energy, and the mathematics. And the energy has to separate into different parts which act against each other to produce something new. So at the beginning, we separate energy into space and the units of energy which are going to build matter. Now, before there's any matter, there's just a quark-gluon soup. Quarks and gluons don't have any volume. Their mass comes from a relationship with the space. That's what we call a force. I separate into two things which are different, they act against each other, they force something to happen. That first force is gravity. And then there's a further separation at the units of energy level into fermions and bosons, quarks and leptons, and everything's just two manifestations of the same thing. So space and matter are two manifestations of the same thing. And sure enough, space itself will bubble into a little unit of energy and an anti-unit of energy, and then bubble away again. We know all this is true. All the mathematics that we see in nature needs a logical explanation. And that explanation does not and cannot come from the physics. So why are we so stubbornly looking at all this mathematics and not saying, well, the universe is a mathematical structure and a physical structure at the same time? It's because of the way that your brain works. Mental inertia. We are programmed to copy tradition. That's how a culture forms. But it means it's very difficult when a completely new idea comes along to accept it, because you feel comfortable going along with what you've already got. But if human beings carry on going along with what they've already got, they will get a big shock that ends in disaster. That's just like going into the First World War with your eyes completely closed. We did it. And we're doing it again with climate change and the overpopulation of the Earth. So here is an answer, something that you can all trust. Let's deal with the whole story, and we'll start right back here with the very, very basic units of the universe and end up here with a brain and a body. So we need to deal with what conscious thinking is. Now, we've discovered a new branch of mathematics. It started with a guy called Poincaré, who found that he couldn't describe what was happening in the solar system just using Newtonian physics. That was too simple, it only works for two bodies. This mathematics, non-linear mathematics, which means it's unpredictable, it has unpredictable answers, unlike simple physics and algebraic mathematics. This mathematics has parts which are self-organizing, which explains the self-organization I see both at the gravitational level in the solar system and at the atomic level inside a cell. It has chaotic parts, which explains what I see inside a gas or turbulence in a fluid, or at the gravitational level, the motion of the ice particles inside these beautifully ordered rings. It also describes all complex systems, and they all have the same mathematical behavior. The behavior is not governed by the laws of physics. There is no physics in this book at all. And this book shows how systems are governed by mathematical rules which are universal. So here and what those rules look like. These are logistic maps. One of these logistic maps is a population of insects, a predator and a prey. The other map is a map showing chaotic behaviour of a diode in an electrical circuit. What you can see is that they are similar. Self-similarity is part of this mathematical order. You see bifurcations into different parts. Then I see order and chaotic parts goes in and out of random behaviour back to order behaviour, but I see the same pattern. There is no way that insects and electrical circuits can both show the same pattern by chance. This is a very, very complex pattern. So we have to take this on board, that all the complex behaviour in the universe is purely mathematical. But if I go right back to the beginning of the universe and look at the tiny units that build everything, I must find the same thing. And we do. They're called the Planck units. And if I look at the smallest units of energy that build space, they come in values of H, the Planck units. And it's 6.626, and it goes on times 10 to the minus 34 of a joule, or 2 pi. So, even at the base level, I've got to use this mathematical and physics description to tell me what's going on. And that just continues. Now remember these maps, they bifurcate. I can bifurcate into quarks and gluons, bifurcate into space and the particles which are going to make matter, and that gives me gravity, and gravity makes something else happen, stars and elements. So here I've got a feedback loop, so it's the feedback loop. Back here I've got the quarks which come in the pairs, leptons which come in pairs, no mathematics here, no mathematical shapes. These will generate protons and neutrons. Again, I see this mirror everywhere, mathematics and physics, and my protons and neutrons hold themselves in existence by the relationships of the components. If they don't hold themselves in existence, they pop out of existence. So when this star doesn't get any energy, which is being released by what's happening at the atomic level, holding it up, it simply disappears. And we say the life, the birth and the death of a star. But that's at this simple level. Components holding themselves in existence, generating more new components. So this is the generation of ever more complexity and diversity, leading on to more complexity and diversity. When this star dies, these elements all come out and build something which is much more complex. They build a solar system. Now planets are much, much more complex than stars. They've got chemistry, they've got atmospheres, they've got water, and they have to hold themselves in existence in just the same way. Now the relationship between the gravity and the atomic level, the atomic structures builds the stars and the elements. The relationship between gravity and what's happening with the atomic structures, the electromagnetic repulsion of these entities, holds that star up, holds it in existence. So again, I've got the same thing. I've got these existence cycles. That's what it is. It's all complex. Inside the proton, it's very, very complex. There's quarks and anti-quarks, there's gluons which have all the mass. It's all complex. Our silly idea that we could just look at matter as just some units which are little units of substance, other units which carry the properties or the forces in between them, it didn't work at all. Complete nonsense. So now we've got physics, we've got mathematics, we've got numbers, arithmetic, we've got geometry. This is what I see. The geometry of the space, that's what Einstein told us. Space forms these beautiful geometries that we call complex geometries, and we use the Riemann mapping theorem to describe what's happening in the space. So this is a relationship between what's happening in the space and what's happening to the atomic entities. There's a single pole in the middle. So forget these pictures that you see of like a rubber sheep doing this. It's nonsense. It distorts the reality that you observe. I get more and more and more bifurcations. And I also get bifurcations of dimensions. My 3 dimensions bifurcate into 6 dimensions. If I look at a cube from the outside, I see my 3 dimensions of space, volume. But if I'm standing in the middle, I can go left and right, forwards and backwards, up and down. Now, even dimensions bifurcate. I need mathematics to describe that bifurcation of those dimensions, positive and negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. I need the mathematical dimensions and physical dimensions to describe reality. So when animals bifurcate, animals which have a brain, now this happens in planaria, a little worm, and animals like jellyfish don't have this more complex structure where I've got 2 parts. I've got a brain then and a body. Left and right parts of the brain. I've got 2 eyes. Now this bifurcation shows up again in sexuality when animals bifurcate into animals with brains, becoming more complex. They bifurcate into animals which have sexual behaviour. So suddenly I go from animals which reproduce another exact copy of themselves. Every new unit is just the same, to male and female, where every new unit is completely different. What a change that is. We see the Cambrian explosion. Well, that would explain a change like that, the ability to go from just making a copy of yourself and waiting for a genetic change to happen with something going wrong with the DNA, and then I get a more successful animal. How long do I have to wait for that? To all the babies being different. So I get a completely new picture of reality. So I can use my mathematical parts of the universe to explain what's happening inside the brain. The neurons just switch on and off, just behaving like a computer, binary. But I get very, very complex systems and networks that build up, and all networks in the universe build themselves along the same lines. So, and that's mathematical. So I've got the physical parts of the brain, but then I've got the mathematical structure, which shows up all over the universe. So this is a fossil I found as a little boy. Here is a fractal, a mathematical structure, which was built just using a computer, and they're both the same. So we see this mathematics, we use this mathematics. I've got the physical parts of the brain, the energy, I need lots of sugar, that drives the construction of neural networks. Now we get more and more bifurcations until we get the bifurcation that generates language. Now we think, complex thoughts are in language. I have to work all this out. Thinking, and I can hear the words in my head. We think in language. So, language, which is complex, and thoughts generate more of each other. That's how the universe works. It generates more of itself, always using the same algorithm, always using the same pattern, feedback loops, complex. There's a simple part, the physics, added to the complex part, which is nonlinear mathematics, and the nonlinear mathematics and the physics describe the reality that I observe until I get a mind. Now, it's purely mathematical. The language is purely mathematical, and if you start to look at Gödel coding and Alan Turing's work, you'll see that language is just a mathematical structure, but it's all non-physical. I need the physical parts of my voice to get it out, but I get a feedback loop, and I can generate more thoughts. Thoughts can generate more language, but underneath language there's going to be a simpler system which all comes in pairs, and there is. It's music. And under life there are viruses, and before that there are prions. So I just see this same pattern going from simple always to more complex. A brain needs a body to put energy into it. The body needs the brain to control it. It's a feedback loop. That's how the complex world works. And I can only describe reality using a complex description which needs the simple linear parts of physics and non-linear parts of reality. And I put those together and I say exactly the same as I see. And we get feedback loops like this. This is the Heenan attractor, and I can see it's a relationship based upon two mathematical values. Now we call these values attractors. They behave just the same as forces. They attract and repel systems to particular values. And what's happening in this part affects what happens in this part, which goes back and affects what's happening in this part. It says something that generates more of itself. And this behavior is pure mathematics. So there we have a simple description that you can all test. Is this logical or is it not? Very, very simple. And we can all test it. That's what we all need to do before we can move on and don't step straight into the next disaster. We've got the answer. We've got the answer. Now we have to use it. And that means not basing our future on tradition. If we look in the history books and see the traditional way that we behave, we lurch from disaster to disaster. We don't have to do that anymore. Thanks. See you next time in the last part.